What's going on, everybody? I'm back. Today we're in the garage, but this is for in the shed number 3. We're going to start talking about the sprayers. I'm only focusing though on the boom sprayer. I did my one initial video on it way back when, and that covered the math and the basis behind how I designed it, how I spec'd out what I needed on it, what size pump I needed, the calculations for the nozzles I'm using, the walking speed, calibration. But today we're going to be focusing on the pump and its electrical requirements, the battery, which is going to provide the juice, and then the rest of the electrical system and hookup on it, because I receive a lot of questions on how all this is wired up and what do you need to do. Well, we're going to find out right now. Okay, for the pump, this bad boy right here, and excuse the mess, it's dirty. Everything's been used and used heavily. This is a SureFlow, or no, this is a C-Flow, a SureFlow knockoff, I do believe. It's rated at a max of 70 PSI, and it has a output capacity of 3 gallons per minute. Woohoo! Now this is a 12 volt pump, and it runs at about 7.8 amps. Next up's the battery. We got it right down here in this battery tray. I just touched my hand without gloves on some prodiamine overspray. Oops! But this is a 12 volt battery, 12 amp hour. To get it out of the way right now, I chose that based off of the amp rating on the pump. The pump was 7.8 amps of maximum draw, so that 12 amp hour battery technically will allow me, an hour and a half-ish, somewhere in there, an hour to an hour and a half of runtime. That's why I did that. And when you're sizing your pumps, look at the amps on the pump, the maximum draw, and you're going to want to base your battery capacity off of that, but then also off of the size of your lawn. I only have 5,000 square feet, so this is more than enough. I've actually been able to spray 24,000 square feet on a single charge from this battery. I did that not long ago over at my father-in-law's to put down some prodiamine. And this is where all that overspray came from. Now in here we have our fuse. This is our main power lead, and note that nothing is color-coded on this whatsoever. I reused what I had so I didn't have to buy new stuff. But in here, my fuse, I have a 7.5 amp fuse. I went with that and it's close enough. This actually might be a 7.5 amp motor. I'll put the actual amp stuff right in here. But I went with that, and why did I do that? Because I didn't want to put like a 10 or a 12.5 or a 15 in there, because if for some reason something goes wrong on the electrical and it starts drawing more current than it technically should, fuse protects me. So you can't leave the fuse out. So I did things a little bit differently when I came to the actual wiring. A lot of people would just disconnect the leads off the battery and hook a battery tender up to it. I didn't want to do that though, and the reason why is solely on I wanted a cool looking unit. I wanted features that fit me. I would rather just take my battery tender junior and plug it in and not have to worry about disconnecting leads and those wearing out over time. So that's why I did that. So now we're going to talk about this charging port right here. This is what I have here. It's just the battery tender junior, and you just have this little plug-in on the end, and oh, look at that, it connects in right there. Easy peasy, super awesome, easiest way to do it. And plug it in and it charges up. Up here we have the main power switch, this guy right here. I did this to coincide with my charging port. This is a single throw dual pole. I think that's the right way to put it. So on the back of it I have 3 pins and then just a single throw. And what's really, really cool is let's move it over this way if we can get it on this camera. When I fire it up, and you probably can't see there, my spray switch, that activates and the LED illuminates there when I know I have power. When it's in the off state, the way it's wired is that means the battery can charge, because I have a direct connection to the battery there. We'll talk more about the wiring here in a second. So I have the main power switch, and then of course the spray switch right there, and all that does is that provides 12 volts of juice to the pump and kicks it on. Easy as that, super easy. The wiring, now this is a fun part, and I actually did have a viewer reach out and I sent him some information on it. on how I wired it. Since I didn't color code everything, I couldn't really just send a picture. So I had to kind of explain it. I could have drew a diagram out, but I'm terrible at those. I take way too long. I'm not fast using like something like Visio or something to diagram an electric circuit. It's not one of my things I'm really good at. Now, recently though, I did have to replace, or not replace, but I extended, well, I had to replace this and it's white now. This connection here broke off. And then I also rearranged the positioning on this switch. I have that corrected now and everything's good. I do plan on actually redoing a lot of this and changing the battery mount and all that, but that's for the future. So the way I have it right now and the way you would want to wire one of these guys, all your grounds go to ground. So all your ground wires would come together, either connecting into one another or using a ground block. A ground block is probably something I will add to this. All your grounds come together and they go to your negative terminal. Easy as that. Now where things get a little tricky is wiring in the charging port and the switch. Let's start with the simple bit. So we have our ground and then that comes up and that connects here. I'll have the model number right here. It's an R13-135 switch, but pin number 1 would be your ground. Pin number 2 in the middle will actually go up and tie into my spray switch, which has 3 wires as a ground, as the power 12 volt in, 12 volt out, and then that 12 volt wire coming out goes to the pump. And so that would complete the circuit for the pump. Now pin number 3, that's where the wiring got creative. You can put it that way, but what it is I have my positive wire from my battery charger right here. That goes in, connects to pin number 3. And also on pin number 3 is my connection going into my battery. So I have 2 wires coming from pin number 3. One goes to the charging port, one goes down to the battery, and that allows me to have the switch in the off position. I have power going directly to the battery and ground to the battery, but there's no power to the rest of the system, and it charges the battery perfectly fine in this configuration. It's awesome. So one thing I recommend though is when you go and start building and wiring one of these, like color code everything because it will reduce confusion in the future if you need to work on it. I had a little bit of like, oh, what's this, what's that? But it wasn't too bad. But I salvaged pieces from like the pump and the charger cord that connected, the pump that came with it was like a 1 gallon per minute, and it had little alligator clamp leads that would connect to the battery on your lawn tractor. And so I harvested those. That's why I have a black 12 volt power versus a red one, but I did put a little bit of red heat shrink on the end to not confuse me there. And I also sized, as far as like the switches and everything, everything's rated to work within this system here. So the switches are able to meet all the amp load voltage, all that fun, important detail, those are all rated in there. So the electrical's done. It's really, really simple, straightforward, nothing too complex. I figured it out. This here goes to my pickup for the pump. And so there's my little bulkhead thing going in there. And I got a tube going down. I'm still rocking, I think it's, yeah, all this is 1/2 inch tubing. I need to replace this piece with a 3/4 inch to have a straight 3/4 run way down here to the inlet on the pump. That's just something recommended to me by Connor Ward. He did that and noticed improvements. Here's my inline filter. This goes from between your tank and your pump. You have to have this in here. Another question I get is the pressure relief valve. Well, that's this guy here, this component, pretty much from the pressure gauge over. Then there's a T-fitting here that connects, and we have our pump coming in, our supply from the pump. We have our pressure gauge, and we can dial that in, by turning this off. I have a little shut off. It'll switch me into recirculation mode, and that'll get you pretty close. But what I recommend when you go and to get everything dialed in, and it'll change a little bit because once you go and add product to this, the viscosity will change, of course, from what it is of just plain water to the products you add to it. But that'll change, but you can get close. You can get really close with the pressure on that. But then what I do is I run it with just the water, and I have it open to spray, and that primes the whole system as well. That way I get it dialed in close enough for what I'm spraying to get the right flow rate and all of that fun stuff that you can catch out in the first video on how to calibrate and calculate that. I don't want to go into that again. That was a whole lot of math. What this pressure regulator does is, I get a maximum of like 70 PSI out of this guy. If I set it at 30 PSI, so the pump's pumping, and it's wanting to hit that 70 PSI, but this here is set at 30. Once it exceeds 30, the relief opens up and it sends excess back down into the tank to recirculate it back through there. And when I close it, this valve, it is in straight recirculation mode, and that is a feature that you must have. You cannot skimp on recirculation. It's needed to ensure that products don't settle down in the bottom of the tank. I don't have a professional spray rig with this that has like a high-powered recirculation, but it's enough to keep things mixed together. And when I'm going from like my front yard to the backyard, close the valve, leave everything running, and that's continuing to recirculate everything for me. It's absolutely fantastic. What doesn't get recirculated back in, so that 30 PSI, that fires down in, and out the boom it goes. So up front here is, I just have a basic three nozzles set up. I have a 5-foot swath that this thing sprays. I can do a driveway side yard, the Blue Muta, one pass, and it's done. Everything, it's the perfect setup for my size lawn and everything I laid out. Some people can do 2, you might need 4, but thankfully it's customizable, and determining the nozzles you need, that goes into pumps. And again, check out my first video on that because that'll help you determine out what you need. This is the Boom Sprayer. Again, the tank, I picked it up at Rural King. They don't sell it anymore. Amazon sells it, and I have links to that. But any tank will work. This one's worked really, really well. I've been happy with it. Any frame pretty much can work. I just happen to have access to an old 80-pound Let's Go frame. So I use that because, hey, that works. The hopper was all cracked to hell and beaten to piss, but frame was still awesome, so I got that fixed up. It's done the job. It's been an absolute workhorse of a machine. Don't ever really need to use a hose end sprayer, and I do that solely out of convenience for when I need something done. But yeah, I can say piss off hose end sprayer because Mama's home and she's gonna show you how it's done. So that's it for this, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something from it. If you have questions on it, drop them below. You can email me. I will have some parts down there. I do have my initial original sprayer parts list post. I also hope to get one on the wiring done once I actually take the time to do an actual proper diagram so everyone can understand it. I just gotta figure that out and how to draw. Yeah, here it is, the sprayer. My favorite sprayer, my Boom Sprayer. It's the way you apply whatever you need to apply, and applying professional grade, herbicides. Those don't go through hose end sprayers, Doc. Poor judgment there, old man. Time for you to retire. Anyway, Mike, Real Low Dad, if you like this, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we're gonna see you again soon because she's fixed up, she's ready to spray. Have a good one, everyone.